Hello there, my name's Kelly McClellan, and I'm excited to be part of this 90 over 90 series produced by Point of Rock Productions. And today I'm thrilled to be interviewing my grandfather, who is 93 years old. This is Jerrold Pearl Postle, born 1927 on the 27th of January in Columbus, Ohio. My grandfather has left a legacy of love, as you'll hear over the next several minutes, just of loving a family well. And we, his kids, grandkids, have been so blessed, so we're excited to share some of these morsels of wisdom. Gramps is what I'll call him. That's what we call him as his grandkids call him Gramps. He was married to Audrey Reinhardt for 54 years. That's my grandma. And he had 2 sons, five grandkids, and 7 great-grands. And after my grandmother passed away, he was blessed enough to meet Ann Wheeler and have 9 years of marriage with Ann. And through Ann, he inherited 5 more children and lots of grandkids. Too many to count, we decided, right? And lots of great-grandkids. So, Gramps, what was it like growing up in Columbus, Ohio as a little boy?
Well, it was, seems like it was a long time ago, but we lived on the hilltop on the west side of Columbus, and I went to West Broad School, had the same first grade teacher that my mother had, my brother had, and her name was Miss Birch. And we used to lived only a couple blocks from the school, and we'd walk to school, and we played marbles every day in the schoolyard, and it was my grandparents raised me. My parents died when I was just a child, a baby, and I couldn't have had any better parents than my grandparents were to me. They were very caring, and they loved my brother and then me very much.
So you mentioned you had a sibling. That was one of my questions.
Yes, I had a brother, John. He was about 2.5 years older than me, and he was very special to me. He ended up going into the Army and the Air Corps during World War II, and he was killed during the Battle of the Bulge in Germany, and on December 18th, and just before the end of the war. And even though it's been all these years since that happened, I still miss him.
So when you guys were young, did you get along?
Yes, we did. We got along very well. We were very devoted to each other, and we never really had that many problems. I think there were a couple times. I was kind of a brat when I was little, and I did things I'm not proud of, but for the most part, we got along really well together.
One of you've told us, the grandkids, how special your grandfather was and how important and impactful both your grandma and your grandfather were to you. How do you feel like that might have affected how you have been as a grandparent to us? Did it influence you in any way?
My grandfather set a good example. He was always very special to me, and my brother and my cousin who lived with us sometimes. I had a cousin who was my mother's sister's boy, and they lived with us for a while, and my grandfather and my grandmother were very good to us and very special.
Did you grow up in a house that had faith? Did you guys go to church, or how was that?
We didn't go to church. My grandmother was Catholic, and she would always want me to go to Sunday school, and she made sure I went every week, and she used to say prayers with me every night before I went to bed, and I still remember that, even though it's been all these years. And she didn't go to church, but she wanted me to go.
So you've told me a story before about where you prayed for a specific reason.
Well, the house we lived in had a coal furnace, and the upstairs didn't have any, had heat in the bathroom, but no heat anyplace else. I mean, there was no heat in the bedrooms, no air, heat ducts or registers or anything, so we would kneel down in the hallway upstairs by the banister and say our prayers, and sometimes she would heat bricks and wrap them up in a towel and put them in a bottom foot of our bed so we could keep our feet warm in bed. And she was a very special woman, and I loved her very much.
Did you have TV?
No, there wasn't any TV back then. I didn't have TV until after I was married, and then we had a 12-inch TV that,
oh my gosh,
black and white, and must have weighed about 80 pounds.
wow.
It was pretty hard to believe that you could pick up a picture like that. But
So what did you do for entertainment when you were a boy? Were there games or toys that you remember having, or what?
Well, I had mentioned earlier we played marbles every day, and we played marbles, and we played when we listened to the radio. We listened to Jack Benny. We listened to Lum and Abner, and listen to music on the radio sometimes. I used to really like big band music when I was growing up, and but we didn't have any TV. There was no such thing as TV back then.
Did you have a favorite artist? Who was popular in your era, in your region?
Oh, well, a lot. Yeah, Harry James, Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of big bands I really enjoyed listening to.
So I know this answer. Did you like school?
I was never fond of school. I wasn't a good student. I have to admit that I don't think I really tried that hard. I don't think I was that dumb, but I just don't think I really cared for, I don't know, for whatever reason, because I was always encouraged to go to school. My brother was a good student, and he encouraged me to go to school, but I didn't listen.
What was your first job then? Did you have a job in school?
The first job I ever had was when I was about 12 years old. I caddied at a 9-hole golf course. Or I used to hitchhike out to the golf course every day, and so we caddied. We got paid 55 cents for carrying clubs for 18 holes, and sometimes we get a 10-cent tip, sometimes we get no tip. So I wasn't making a lot of money.
Was that a lot of money for back then, though?
No.
No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't a lot of money even then. Mm-hmm. It didn't matter. I just spent, as fast as I made it, I spent it on candy anyway, so.
That was what you, yeah. Candy. So you were in the service. Tell us about your service to our country.
Well, I was in the Navy. I went to radio school down in Memphis, and I graduated from high school in January in 1945. I went in the Navy on in February, a month later, and I spent 18 months in the Navy. The war ended while I was still in radio school, so I was never faced with having to go into combat or into any overseas duty or anything like that. So it was not too many things happened to me while I was in the Navy. It was just something I had to do. I joined because if I hadn't joined, I would have been drafted.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Did you specialize anything?
I was an aviation radio man, and if I would have been on a big, they called it a PB4Y2. It was a big plane that I would have been a radio operator and a tail gunner, and it's probably a good thing I was not born a year earlier, or I probably wouldn't be here today, because that was really a vulnerable place to be in an airplane when you went into combat. So that was my time in the Navy.
So when did you meet Audrey?
I met her when I was in the 7th grade over at West High School. A friend of mine introduced us. I can remember it very well. We were up on the balcony in the auditorium, and he kept bragging about her and how cute she was and everything. And when I saw her, I thought, I don't see anything so special about her. But then when I went home, I got thinking about it. I thought, she's pretty special after all. And so that was in the 7th grade. And we really didn't date after that. I did take her to a movie one time, shortly after that, and but she took her nephew with us. I don't know whether she didn't trust me or what, but anyway, then we didn't get together again for quite a while. And when I went into the Navy, we used to write letters back and forth. We would write to each other almost every day, and that's how we really got to know each other, because we were, I think we just kind of fell in love through those letters. And when I got out of the Navy, we got married shortly after, and were together for 54 years.
So, did you ever tell her that you didn't think she was very special?
I don't think so.
That was probably good. That was probably a wise choice. So between Grandma, Audrey, you guys were married for 54 years, and then Grandma Ann, you were married for 9 years. So you have 63 years of successful, and when I say marriage, they were not just living parallel lives together. They were very close. They enjoyed each other's company. I remember this specifically as a grandchild. I used to come and stay for a month. We would come and stay for a month. And you were very close with Grandma and Grandma Ann. And so that's scarce today. So I'm wondering if you have any advice or wisdom that you would say when you're thinking about marriage and what it takes to make marriage good.
Well, I've often said that if you really love someone, you want more for them than you do for yourself, and that's the way I felt about your grandma, and that's the way I felt about Ann. They were both very special to me, and I still miss both of them. And I just treasured the time that I spent with both of them.
That's really good and kind of rare these days to put other people in front of your own needs and desires. That highlighted that. Didn't it? So your career. Tell us how you chose your career.
Well, that's probably about as It's the hardest question to answer that I could ever imagine. I came out of the Navy and I had some credit coming on a GI Bill, which allowed me to either go to college or to learn a trade. And I did start to college at Ohio State, and realized shortly after that I wasn't going to be able to finish because I was already married, and I don't think my oldest boy was born yet, but he was due, and so I looked at other possibilities and about learning a trade, and so for some reason I can't even explain, I decided I was going to learn to sew, to do alterations, and that's how I started out doing that. And I spent my whole working career from then on working in different stores and doing alterations, and that's what I retired from.
And I used to think that was called being a tailor, but you corrected me recently. What is that called?
Well, it's a word you'd hardly ever hear, but it's called a bushelman, which means you do alterations and instead of actually making clothes. So that's what I did. I worked for several different stores. The last one I worked for was pretty big store, specialty store, called the Union, and I worked there for about 20 years, and that was the most enjoyable job I had while I was working.
And this was in the time when style was not blousy, right? I know you used to make fun of us when we were in high school because our clothes were too big, but it was important to have things fitted and cuff lengths, and
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that alterations are done as much today probably as they were back then.
No, not so much.
How many were you working by yourself, or were there other people who worked alongside of you? And
Well, when I was at the Union, I had as many, I was responsible for as many as like 40 people at different times, because we had a main store, we had 7 branch stores at one time, and we had people working in all those stores, and I was the alteration department manager, so that was different from when I first started out because I did work pretty much by myself. I mean, I worked in stores, but I wasn't in the management.
now we grew up hearing stories about some situations and people that you worked with when you were in that department. Do you have any special memories or people that come to mind that you'd want to share?
Well, I had a lot of special people. I really loved the people that worked in my department. I mean, I'd never had a problem with anybody. I think they showed respect to me, and I appreciated it, and so it was good. The years I worked at the Union were very good.
I seem to remember you just having a lot of laughter together.
A lot of what?
Laughter.
Yeah, we had fun. Yeah, we did have fun. And even though I'm retired, I still see some of the people who worked there, and it's just nice, It's fun to know that we got along so well together.
Yeah, because I think there were a lot of different cultures represented working all together. So how many?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that. It seemed I don't remember which ones or how many, but
Well, most of the people were Italian, but some of them were German. We had people from Mexico. We had some from Austria, mostly all foreign people. Not too many people from America worked in alteration. There were a few, and but it was a good group, and we got along well together.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of neat to think of a mini melting pot, because I know you shared that you really learned a lot from them, and that working so close together that you got to enjoy and learn and realize that you loved people who weren't a lot like you sometimes, right?
Right.
So I know we said that you didn't like school, but for the grandkids, our memories are my first introduction to opera or to poetry, or you're a voracious reader, you've always loved music and had music playing in the house, you and Granny. Where do you think that came from?
I can't answer that question.
Do you remember when that started, or how that horizon peaked for you, or?
Yeah, I don't know, but I've always loved music, and I love dancing. I still love dancing. I love to see even just commercials on TV. When I see somebody making special moves, it's thrilling to me, and I love it, but I can't do it.
Well, you did have a small little jaunt in dancing. What was that like?
Oh, square dancing, yeah. Well, square dancing doesn't require any rhythm. You know, you just have to listen and be able to remember what the caller is telling you to do. But it doesn't require any particular rhythm.
I don't know that might not be debated somehow somewhere. But tell me tell me about your square dancing.
Well, it might sound like I'm bragging, but Audrey, my first wife, and I were good square dancers. I mean, they used to have different levels of square dancing, and we did what they called challenge dancing, which was the hardest kind of square dancing to do. And they would just give you the name of something you're supposed to do, and you had to know what that meant, and you had to be able to execute it. And everybody in your square, which included 4 couples, had to do it. And if one of them messed it up, then the whole thing broke down. So that's the reason they call it challenge dancing. And we went to national conventions for about, I don't know, 10 years or something like that. And we really enjoyed that a lot.
Mm-hmm. We are sitting in front of this Ohio State Buckeye quilt.
Yeah.
One of your grandkids made you. And we know that you've always loved sports. One of the questions that we had for you was, is there a favorite or memorable moment or a favorite athlete or coach that sticks out to you?
Well, I've always been a fan of Cleveland Indians. All as far back as I can remember. I remember 1948. I would have been 21 years old. They won the World Series, and they had an outstanding team, obviously, or they wouldn't have won the World Series. But they had a special pitching staff, and they had Bob Lemon, Mike Garcia, Bob Feller. I can't remember the others, but I always rooted for the Cleveland Indians. It's been kind of frustrating since then. They haven't won any World Series since then. They've been in the World Series twice since then, but they haven't won. And I think my favorite manager was Mike Hargrove. He was a manager back in, I don't know when, but they still interview him sometimes when they have things on about the Indians. And we had a lot of special players, Herb Score, Kenny Lofton, Lou Boudreau, uh, Terry Francona's father was Tito Francona. He was a special player, and I still root for the Indians, and I still hope that they do well next year.
Mm-hmm.
It's always
There's
next
always
year.
next year, right? Yeah. Well, you have 9 decades of experience and wisdom. And when we think back of, I think one of the founders of this 90 over 90 says that hopefully through these interviews that they would learn the secret to what it looks like to live a long and happy life. And so thinking back over your 90 years, 93 years now, is there any tidbit or morsel of wisdom that you could give us?
Sometimes I wonder about that myself, and I wonder what I've done to have lived this long, and I certainly never expected to. Nobody in my family has ever come close to living to be 93 years old, and I don't think I don't exercise, I don't eat probably like I should, but I'm still here. So I don't think I can answer that question.
No bit of, there's not a perfect diet or a perfect exercise regime that you're going to suggest?
No.
How would you say, you said you didn't grow up going to church, but growing up, coming to visit with my grandma and grandpa, I know that I went and sat in the classes where you taught Sunday school. So I know that you have been a big influence in my walk with God and with my brothers and sisters and my cousins. And so over the years, growing up, how has your relationship with God changed?
Well, it's gotten better certainly, but I think that you say I've been a good influence on your relationship with God, and yours has been a big help to me too, and your sister Carrie. You've both helped me in my relationship with God, because I know how close you are and how close you are to your church and how many good things you do. And I'd say that probably that's been the main reason that I'm close to the church and close to God now.
That's awfully nice. I sat here and listened to you read a devotional to us today, and I thought, this is a really big blessing to hear these words of life spoken over us. And I know that you maybe don't acknowledge what big impact you've had, but it's been lovely to see over the years and to enjoy the benefit there. And I feel like recently you've gotten closer.
Yeah, definitely. When before Audrey died, my first wife, I had she spent like 90 days in the hospital, and she suffered.
So in the last several years, I know that you have gotten closer to God. And so what do you think changed? What shifted for you?
Well, when Audrey was in the hospital for about 90 days before she died, she suffered so much pain and had to have surgery 2 different times, and had by the time she ended up dying, she had to have hospice come to our house, and she came home for 1 day, and she died that same night. And I was just devastated, and I didn't, for a long time, I didn't pray, I didn't go to church, and I didn't really blame God for what happened, but I just had a hard time dealing with what she suffered before she died. But then suddenly for some reason I decided that, those things happen, and it's not God's plan really, but I knew that I decided to go back to church, and right now I'm very close to my church, and I feel very comfortable there. I feel loved there, and I love the people I go to church with, and so I'm happy about that.
Yeah, it's been really sweet to see how well they love you at
Yeah.
your church. Well, we are close to closing, and we're going to close. I know how we're going to close. Is there anything before we close that you wanted to share about memories of the last 93 years?
I thought you were going to ask me about telling the joke.
Oh, I am. Before we get there. I don't know if you noticed, but he's got an incredible memory. He can remember his first grade teacher. He can remember more than we can remember. He can remember all of his house numbers. I am going to ask you, is there anything before we get to the joke? No, we're getting to the joke. So we know that one of the things that our Gramps has contributed to our family is just the gift of laughter, that he has always been quick to bring joy to a table, to have a joke, and he's kind of famous for a specific joke. We debated, okay, this is going to be on the web. Are we sure that you want to tell your joke? But he's famous at our family gatherings for this joke.
I said on that Storyworth thing that we did last year or year before, whatever, that I didn't think this joke was appropriate. But the more I think about it, I think it's really kind of funny. So I think maybe it is appropriate. It's about a young man who was a wrestler, and he wrestled in high school, and he was pretty good. He beat everybody he had a match with, and after a while he decided, I'm pretty good at this. I think maybe I might turn pro. So he did. He turned pro. He got a manager, and the manager would set up matches for him, and he beat everybody that came along. He just never lost. And so the manager kept getting harder matches for him as time went on, and he got matches in foreign countries, over in Germany and Poland, and he still beat everybody that he fought, that he wrestled with. So the manager said, I think I got a match for you that might be a real challenge for you. He said, there's a wrestler over in Russia. His name is the Great Mephisto, and he has never lost a match. And the reason he's never lost a match is because he has a particular hold that he gets on the people he's in a match with, and they can never get out of it. It's called the pretzel hold. So they had a lot of planning to do, and so finally the time came for him to go into this match with this Russian wrestler. And so the manager said, now when you get in that ring with this guy, he said, don't ever let him get the pretzel hold on you, because nobody has ever broken out of that hold. And he's beat everybody he's ever wrestled with. So he said, okay, I'll be careful. So the match started, and he thought, I'm not going to let him get that pretzel hold on me. So the manager was watching the match, and they started out, and finally the Russian got this guy in the pretzel hold, and the manager threw his hands up, and he said, well, I guess it's all over, because nobody's ever broken out of that hold. So he was just walking away, and as he walked away, he heard the crowd cheering, and he turned around, and here the referee was holding his man's hand up that he won the match. And then so he went over to him and he said, well, what happened? He said, well, I said, I was doing pretty good. He said, I almost had him pinned a couple times. And all of a sudden he made a quick move and got that pretzel hold on me. He said, I couldn't move a muscle. He said, I opened my eyes. There was something hanging down in front of my eyes. And I couldn't do anything with my hands or anything, so I didn't have anything else to do, so I just bit it. And he said, what happened then? He said, well, you'd be surprised how much strength it gives you when you bite your own testicles. So that's my story.
That's his story, and I'm pretty impressed because you got through it. A lot of times he starts laughing before he even gets to the punchline, so you've been practicing on that one. Well, I'm very thankful that you would come on here and let us do the interview. We really appreciate it, and it'll be something we can treasure forever.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so we are signing off for 90 over 90. Thank you for doing this very important work.